Brothers WISP. The Brothers WISP, Brothers WISP. The Brothers WISP. The Brothers.
You're now listening to Greg, it's the Brothers WISP. Let's take a ride through space on this mothership. Wireless networking, we talk about equipment and methodology. So sit back and start learning. Lighten up the tower so people can start searching. Shooting
The
up
Brothers
the web
WISP is
neighborhoods
brought
net
to you by Sonar, a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP billing and operational support system. Learn more at sonar.software. Tower coverage is your RF propagation system to empower your network, real-time data metrics, enable your coverage area, reaching your customer base, and more. The industry's best RF propagation mapping system allows website integration for customer sign-up and pre-qualification. Use this data to scientifically plan network expansion and help your WISP succeed. Get a free trial today at towercoverage.com. Preseam is a cloud-based quality of experience platform that helps regional fixed wireless and fiber operators manage subscribers and optimize network health across access technologies and vendors. A 4-time winner of WISPA's Service of the Year award, Preseam provides data-powered tools and insightful KPIs that help reduce support and training costs, drive growth, and help benefit every team at an ISP. Visit preseam.com for more details. Whew, that one was hard. Hey everybody, it's Tommy with the Brothers WISP. On my left here, I got Tomas Kirnak, hailing all the way from Slovakia for the first time in a little while. You've been running around all over the place from what I hear.
Yeah, it's been very busy. Hi, everybody.
And then down over here, he may be on the bottom, but he is far from the bottom in intelligence. I think he would be pretty close to the top in this room. John Osman, hailing from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hi guys, it's good to see everybody. I think I need to do a Braulio and move to another room then, if that's going to be the case. I don't think it's true. I think everybody here, I think it just depends on what topic we're going to talk about. I think we're going to run into that later today.
Well, we got a few different ones. I've been kind of just putting these together. I will throw stuff into like on my Facebook whenever I see something. I'll be like, "Ooh, save that," and every various other places. So all morning I've been like, "Ooh, all these different topics that I've found over the last few weeks. What the heck is to be interesting?" And so I got a couple different things. Which one sounds most interesting to you guys I guess kind of conferences? What have you been doing, John?
Last conference I went to, I actually got to see Mike at the Midwest Peering.
Yep.
Midwest Peering in Kansas City about a little month or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very interesting. I was walking into the room and I bumped into somebody. I turned around and I was like, "Hey, you look familiar. Hey, I've never met you before in real life. Hi, Mike." It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Mike had a lot of fun at that conference. There's some pretty big hands at that conference.
Yeah, that was it was very useful for running into people that having a lot to do with peering nowadays around the U.S. I mean, because the peering landscape is changing drastically. With lots of the bigger companies are no longer wanting to peer through route servers, and so they're wanting to go to more and more instead of multilateral peering into bilateral peering, which makes it harder for the little guys to convince people to work with them. But it's also going to be, it gives the bigger guys a lot more control over what they're going to be doing. So I can see all the reasons things are going different ways, but it's gonna be fun to watch. It's just like networking always. It always changes.
Yeah. And Kirnak, you said you've been running around all over the place, and you've actually got a pretty legitimate reason to be hitting all the different conferences. Where have you been to this last summer?
So I was to the MikroTik MTPC conference in Prague. That was a mom replacement conference. That was an interesting one. It was certainly nice to get something mom adjacent happening again. And yeah, there was a bunch of other ones. I went to AutoCon, which is a network automation forum. There was TNC, which is it's a conference which is every year somewhere else. This year that was in France, and that's mostly about big academia networks and HTPC, high performance computing stuff. So a little bit of a different crowd. And yeah, there was a bunch of local conferences. I went to CSNOG, I went to a bunch of Czech and Slovakian networking conferences. And yeah, that's been my spring and summer.
Thomas, are you going to show up to AutoCon too in the States?
Yeah, I plan to.
Okay. My friend is running it. Did you meet Chris Grundeman?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Chris lives in El Paso, which is just south of us, and he's been kind enough to come wandering up whenever we have meetings up here, and he's helping us with the IX at times. Yeah. So I try and go support him when I can.
Yeah, the AutoCon, the European one, was in Amsterdam, and that was a very interesting conference. So yeah, there's been a bunch of stuff happening, definitely.
Yeah, and then coming up, there's Albuquerque Con.
Yeah, we're gonna do a little smaller network operator group on August 15th. If anybody wants to show up, abqnog.org. It's free, but we do ask you to register on the website so we know who's going to be showing up. Last year we were hoping to get a dozen, maybe 20 people to show up, and we had 80 people show up, and it was a lot busier than we expected. And this year I think we're going to be closer to 25 again, and it'll be a little more personal, but it should be good. We need to keep things like this running in different regions just to get some of the local people to get together to talk, particularly about interconnection and things of that nature.
Yeah. I was just seeing there's a inaugural network users group event in Illinois happening. I think that's the same weekend, August 15th. Here, and then there's a bunch of other ones all across the United States. Network user groups.
Yeah, it's been the NOGs have a long history, pretty much everywhere. So
yeah, so check out your local one. They've got, I'm seeing New York, Texas, Illinois, New Hampshire, Indiana, Ohio, Nebraska. Yeah, so all in the next month. So definitely check them out. Meet some of the guys who you are sending packets to or getting packets from.
Exactly. Anybody listening to this, if you haven't been to one of these, beg, borrow, steal, find a way to go, get to one of the meetings and network with some of these people directly, because you never know when one of them is going to be going to say the right thing that make you decide how to, move your network next, or gives you an idea of another tool that is going to make your life easier, or that you can help them. The true synergy of everybody getting together and talking about this stuff is just amazing. I think the in-person stuff is dreadfully important, because some of the some of the nonverbal and non-visual cues you get from people standing in the same room just makes everything different.
Well, and a side note, Mike and I have gone to another conference, Chicago Network Operators Group meeting, and 2 years ago, there was a Verizon wireless network engineer there, or a couple of them, and we have continuously had issues with Verizon has a direct phone peering. I can't remember what it's a bunch of T1s or something like that. That every once in a while it would go down, and the problem was Frontier's equipment, but we were riding on a backbone of theirs. And when Frontier's equipment broke, we would have to complain to Frontier. Then Frontier would have to then complain to Verizon, and then it would finally get fixed, and whatever. And this would happen every few months for us, and it was a pain in the butt. And I was able to sit down with a network engineer. He was like, "Oh, over in where? DeKalb? Okay, yeah, cool. I'll have somebody go take a look at that and see if we can figure out what the heck's going on." And after that, I have not had to submit a complaint into Frontier about that. So, little weird issues can really help.
The power of conferences.
Yeah.
And just being willing to sit down and talk to whoever's sitting next to you and say, "Hey, what do you do?"
Yeah. Just asking, like, what do you do? I've got to meet Twitter employees before they probably half of them got axed. That was pretty funny. Juniper, I met this Juniper engineer who was pushing to do multicast over LTE. He wanted to do 6G multicasting at the tower, and I was watching the Twitter guys and some other guys all going back and forth and discussing like how that was a great idea, but also a terrible idea at the same time, and why no one would ever implement it. And it's like, it's cool, it's really fun, and you can learn a lot. So definitely worth the time.
I think that was the meeting that made me decide to try and build up ABQnog and just
well, you were there, weren't you?
Yeah, because when you were starting talking about the 6G, I remember watching you and your face ping-ponging between people during that conversation at dinner.
Yeah, I was able to follow along. I wasn't contributing. No, was not, but I was able to follow along and be like, okay, yeah, I see why that's a good idea. I see why that's not why he doesn't want to do that. So, yeah, definitely hit up some conferences.
So there's conferences. Go to conferences. Go meet people. Go talk with people. Go find ways to do things differently.
Well, I guess let's move up the slides, or the sheet. Unimis 2.5 is out. Kirnak. What's new? What's the coolest? User provisioning.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's been in development for literally 8 months at this point. So there was pretty much a complete rebuild of the user security system and the way that you set up per object privileges.
Mm-hmm.
There's also automatic user provisioning, so you can completely automate, when you onboard new people, create their accounts in Unimis with preset access policies and all that. So, that was painful because it touched pretty much every single thing in Unimis there is. When you start getting into access controls and the you have your role-based access control RBAC, but then you also have per object access controls, and those are two entirely different systems. And of course, the per object access controls, they touch literally everything in the system. So that was a fun one to rework and rebuild. But there's also the possibility to create custom backup flows. So that just gives you the ability to influence or change how Unimis backs up devices. And you can do pre-post backup commands. You can influence what gets ingested into a backup, and that solved like a bunch of cases where people were like, "Oh, I want this before, I want this after, and can it also do this? And can you do this device differently?" Then yeah, sure, we just made a system where you can build this yourself. So that's completely customizable now.
Yeah, and I bet in the larger scale, when you get larger and larger deployments of Unimis, people really need that granular control of stuff and have people available to build those granular controls.
It's so actually there's not been that many people that ask for it, because like when we build our drivers, we always consult with the people that we build the driver with, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the right way? What should be there? What shouldn't be there? So I would say 90+% of cases this is not needed, but it is definitely nice to have in the rest of the 10% cases where you do want to do some customization.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there's also
and then you support Netbox.
Yeah, there's support for Netbox. I know Jeremy is happy about that one. He's been asking for that for quite some time, and so that's now finally in there as well. And then a bunch of minor stuff.
Yeah,
It's like
bunch of little
20
bugs.
plus features in there, so it's a big release.
Yeah, but you have a big smile. You must have done something right in the long run if you can smile right now.
So the nice thing is we have, I don't want to say finally because it hasn't been bad historically, but this was 8 months of development, absolutely major feature. We haven't had a single issue. Like already 1/3 of our active user base has updated to it, and there hasn't been a single major issue, and I'm so happy about that. It's like,
wow,
yeah, that's probably the best part about it. No need to do hotfix releases. It's been through like 3 beta releases and a bunch of internal testing, but to me that's like the best part about it.
So CrowdStrike wasn't your problem? You didn't cause
that? No.
No, actually, was there any of us that were affected by CrowdStrike?
Yeah, I was at Heathrow.
Oh, nice.
And we got lucky. We showed up and we had only a 2-hour delay. We were like the first folks that really got back rolling again. But it was a madhouse, and I'm pretty sure that's where I picked up COVID and ended up this whole week down, except until some of the antivirals that my doc gave me kicked in.
Oof. Yeah, no. That was pretty. I was off on vacation when that occurred, and we had driven down to where we were at, and I was like, do. Oh, there's something going on with the internet. Don't care, not my problem. Then somebody's like emailing me saying, "Hey, we're having a bunch of customers complaining about it. Webs, could you check?" Oh, fine. Do. No, everything's fine over here. Everything's fine over here. No, there's nothing. And then somebody else is like, "Dude, CrowdStrike." I'm like, "What? I'm not paying attention to news. I'm checked out." He sent me the link. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that would probably do it. Here you go, bus." Was not me. I was
Yes,
not.
there's a problem. No, it's not our fault.
Yeah, there's literally nothing we can do about it. That the website is just down. So, and then of course there's like somebody. Of course, there's one customer that started complaining about the same time, and we've a week later they're still complaining. It's like, oh, okay, what's going on? Oh, this is actually a problem. Not mine. It's somebody else's firewall that decided that a whole subnet range is bad. That's been in use for years.
Bad range. Bad
range. Yeah. So
it was actually multiple successive issues, right? There was first the AVS outage, which threw everyone for a loop, and then there was CrowdStrike, which and that was confusing to a bunch of people for a while.
Yeah. So
it's affecting me.
Yeah. So the Microsoft outage, what was I actually haven't followed that at all. What was that?
There was an Azure outage.
Okay, just Azure went down.
As far as I know, it was unrelated to CrowdStrike. Yeah, so there was an Azure outage for a while that got solved, and then a few hours, literally after that, first affected people with CrowdStrike started to appear. And so it was mixed in together. There was a huge cloud outage, and then there was the end node, server as well, I suppose, if your servers ran CrowdStrike and you run Windows Server, you kind of deserve it in this case. I didn't say anything.
I guess to me, besides like running Active Directory, I know that there's IIS and such, and there's some people who use Windows as a database server. But I guess is that just is Windows Server bigger in the bigger company world?
It's huge. Definitely in medical space and healthcare, it's everywhere.
Well, obviously it's a medical, healthcare, airlines.
Yes.
I guess we could probably just see what where is Microsoft Server popular? And
Well, you got to
by
remember
what
that
went down.
there's nothing wrong with any of the Microsoft stuff. I mean, you look at what it was designed after. It was a lot of the stuff that came out of digital, in the DEC world, and a lot of the things that lived in VMS got, into the core of NT. The problem is finding people that know the internals of that OS as well as you can find with, the Linux and the Unix world. I mean, the Linux and the Unix world, there's lots and lots of people that know, oh, if this breaks, look over here. And in the Windows world, there's the same people that can go, oh, wait, something happened, look right here. But there aren't that many that know how to do it.
Well, to me, it's more about like the history and the historical choices with the OS, right? Because, like, let's face it, Windows Server, half of it is legacy code, right? Because they have to keep the compatibility with crazy stuff written in literally 1990s, right? And that's a choice that Microsoft has made, and we could argue if that choice is good or not. But yeah, it's same like if you look into the internal infrastructure of your desktop Windows, right? Yeah, you can install an app that ran on Windows XP, and it will probably run. I mean, not certainly, but it will most probably run. You can still install like the .NET 3.5 in Windows 10, right? And like, how crazy is that? Imagine the legacy code and the amount of backwards compatibility that is in there, and how much that affects the code base, right? And we see that with Active Directory as well, right? You can still join Windows XP to Active Directory if you set the right settings in there and completely break your security model. Sure, and like those are all decisions which have an effect, right? And which form and shape how the entire operating system behaves, is configured, what are the defaults, etc., etc. And like all of that, at least to me, it's not in the greatest place. And yeah, just like John said, you install it, you consider it secure, but there is so many things which you need to do and understand, and people just don't because it's Windows. It's easy, just install it and it's done. But really, it's much more complicated in the server world, and most people don't take precautions that they should.
Yeah, well, they took precautions. They installed a security software to make certain that hackers won't get in. And they trusted CrowdStrike. Now, to be fair, like, what happened, my understanding is it was a kernel level driver that was installed so that CrowdStrike can do monitoring of certain aspects of the operating system and how things talk to the operating system, and be able to detect when if something was actively trying to, like a port scan or I don't know exactly what the driver did, but that driver got updated auto-magically across hundreds of millions of devices, and that I don't know if it as soon as the driver was updated, or I'm guessing that's when it was, because they all went down and nobody said, don't restart your computer. But I guess it's, so yeah, it would have been a reload of the driver, and then as soon as it came up, blue screen of death for the operating system. So, once again, throwing in third-party code into Microsoft's beautiful operating system has brought it to its knees, and is one of the reasons why I was never a huge fan of third-party antiviruses, because they're just,
well, anytime you give control at, basically ring zero of the OS to anyone, doesn't matter. I mean, if the OS vendor or anybody else, whoever has that control has the ability to trash everything.
mm-hmm.
And, and when you get to the point where you need to examine everything as it comes in, it's like, oh, I'm an antivirus thing. Well, I need to be able to look at everything at a low enough level, so that I know whether or not the OS is going to get jacked up or not. But you then run into the, who watches the watchers, who gets to control those things, or it's turtles all the way down. Who's in control?
Yeah. So I guess one question I would have is, at this point, you're an IT manager, and would you then say to CrowdStrike, hey, I want an ability to have a 6-hour delay on my stuff, and you can update some of my test systems first, and then I can give you the go ahead to, or is that just honestly there's just so many things being
so now you
updated
want to
that you
give
just
somebody else AB control over what you're going to be doing with your system. So how far how granular do you want to do that?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the point of what CrowdStrike was offering is, hey, we do automatic updates. We'll let you know if there's a problem. Everything else, like, I guess, is this definitely for some IT managers, I could see people being like, all right, guess we're off of CrowdStrike. We're off to somebody new. Do you think that a lot of IT guys would be more prudent to leave them entirely, or just take a different policy? Because like this was an automatically pushed update. There was that you had no control over. And I don't know, like when you have managed millions of devices, how do you say this is when I need to have
we talked a little bit earlier about bigger guys and peering, and the idea that do you want lots and lots of peering relationships like say Hurricane Electric does, or do you want to minimize the engineering problems that come along with that many peerings, and maybe go in the opposite direction and go to Cogent, who only talks with people that pay them? There's trade-offs on each side of that. I'm going to say there's trade-offs for the same thing. If you use the same software for every single one of your machines, you're giving yourselves a single point of failure. But what are the odds? Are you going to have more problems with a single point of failure, like with CrowdStrike, or trying to run 2 or 3 different versions of software based on which machine you have? So now I have 3 times the engineering problems and an exponential number of issues trying to deal with trying to keep us an open market for what software is running, and can I pick and choose like a salad bar of which one I like the best at that moment? Who do you trust? When? Where? Why? You pick your vendors well. Pick your vendors that you work well with.
It's always about risk management and pros and cons to everything.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Well, moving on from all that fun stuff, newer versions of 7.16 are hitting the testing. Anybody interested? Fun stuff about that?
I personally read through the changelog, but there wasn't anything groundbreaking, or
No,
not to me.
They're getting ISIS looking nicer, so I'm like reading through it. I'm like, fine. I actually need to sit down and learn this stuff. But that's the big stuff that I've been paying attention to. By and large, I mean, there's a bunch of a bajillion little things that MikroTik, but there's always little bug fixes and such. But I don't even remember, where did I link it to? I guess I didn't do a link for it, but
it's gradual development. Things move forward. Sometimes slowly, smaller releases, sometimes fast, bigger releases. Same with MikroTik, right?
Yeah, it's and they move at their own speed, not anyone else's. But actually, I've been going through and looking at like various vendor agreements and such, and it just blows me away that MikroTik does all of this work and doesn't require a annual software license for any of this. And that's a ton of work.
It's their business model, right? They have it's a very differently structured company and sales process and support process to almost all the other vendors, right? So they can keep their prices because the way they structure their company and their business models. It is very nice for us, indeed.
Yeah, it is very cool, and looking forward to seeing as new stuff comes out. ISIS, they did do a lot of fixes, so it's getting closer to being full lab. You could run it for your house. Right now, IPv6 doesn't work entirely.
We need to
But
fix that.
One of the better reasons to run ISIS.
yes, is that it does make IPv6 makes it a lot easier than OSPF. Which all right, so I'm learning and like kind of getting a generalized understanding of it. I've been told that ISIS is like the service provider version of OSPF. And John, you said you've run ISIS before.
Yeah.
Thomas, do you have any experience with it?
I have labbed ISIS, but I have never ran it in a production network. I have read up a bunch on it, but no production experience.
So I have basically none. I've watched Kevin Meyer's video, and I'm getting my lab updated to the latest version so that I can play around with it. What are they like? What is the selling point of ISIS? Is it just that, hey, we can conglomerate both V4 and V6 into one protocol?
That's part of it. I mean, the real answer is use ISIS or OSPF as it is stable with your vendor.
Okay.
You know, that's the first step.
Like,
the first step is you need an IGP that's stable for you.
Yeah, realistically, it's a routing protocol, right?
Exactly.
Honestly, it doesn't matter that much which you use in most use cases. I'm not saying everywhere, but in most use cases, you put up OSPF and OSPF v3, or you put up ISIS and you're good.
Yep. But there are some design pieces of ISIS that I like better, and the idea that the TLVs being used instead of OSPF. I mean, when you go back far enough, OSPF, the first code that was actually pushed out commercially, really in the Cisco world, was based on the ISIS code that they had, and then it kind of branched off, and everybody else started using it, and everybody else started using the routing protocol.
Yeah, historically, there absolutely were differences and reasons to run one or the other. These days, though, the situation is
in days of old, I mean, ISIS was really nice because you could run multiple protocols on top of it. I mean, it's not an IP protocol at all. It's CLNS. It's left over from the OSI days, and its real purpose is just being a distributed database. And as such, you can't really, OSPF, you can conceptually attack it at IP level and, send, well-crafted packets and do things. And you could actually send, you might be able to send things across network layers to get to things that could disrupt things. But CLNS, you can't really, because it's really only talking at layer 2 in between the two routers at any given point.
And my understanding is CLNS is its own ether type. So instead of TCP or UDP or OSPF packet, ARP, there's all of those different. So it's its own ether type, and because it's its own ether type, it won't necessarily be routed outside of a layer 2 domain because
it's not really an ether type. It's still Ethernet frame, right?
Yeah.
So ether type doesn't, please, you can correct me, John, it doesn't have a difference. The difference is in the layer 3, quote unquote, which we were actually discussing a little bit before the podcast, like what is layer 3 and stuff like that. But what I wanted to interject with is actually one cool thing is the shortest path bridging, which is the newer, better version of spanning tree actually uses ISIS on the backend as well. So you can see a use case there as well that ISIS is fully, like John said, it's just a distributed database which can be used for many use cases.
So the idea is, if you got multiple databases sitting on these networking devices, it might be a list of layer 3 routes, it might be a list of layer 2 routes, it might be a list of whatever it is, and ISIS is really there. The TLVs can be used to, signal what you have in your database to an adjacent router. Okay. So if it happens to be, if you think about it, that's what OSPF is doing.
Yeah.
EGP, that's what they do. The idea is I have an adjacent partner that I'm talking to in some way, shape, or form, and I'm trying to let them know some information. And in OSPF, it's, it should be, here's my internal routes. And BGP, if you're using IBGP in your, maybe it's, here's the customer connected routes, here's the static routes that I've pushed off the edge of my network, and here's the dynamic pieces. But in those worlds, we're doing, and BGP, people have seen for years, it's like, we don't have to just push around just prefixes. I mean, we're pushing around prefixes, but we attach to them these integers that we call communities, and we assign these integers values that mean something someplace, so that we call them coloring the routes, so that you can say, ooh, all the blue routes, filter them out over on this side of the network. The red routes, let them through. They give you that ability. ISIS is just another way of doing this thing, but it was built from the ground up to do multiple things. It's not just IP addresses. It's not just IPv4. It's not just IPv6. It could also be MAC addresses. It could be, I got to think about this, whether MPLS, any of the pieces actually, I don't think they actually get pushed around inside there. That's all ends up in tag distribution. But
not MPLS that I know.
Yeah.
It's an integrate with ISIS.
But, conceivably, if people wanted to move things around, they could do that. Just, it depends on how far you want to abuse things. Just like, how far has DNS been abused in the last 20 years?
Yeah. Well,
think of it just like another routing protocol that's just more flexible. So like OSPF is designed to do one thing, right? OSPF v3 is designed to do one thing. Route IPv4 versus IPv6 respectively. Whereas with ISIS, you can route many things, whatever you like John said. L2 routes, right? Like in case of the SPB, shortest path bridging, or IPv4, IPv6.
Yeah, shortest path bridging uses, wants to use ISIS underneath it to distribute the layer 2 routes.
So
EVPN wants to typically, they want to start using BGP for most of that. So it's just a matter of how do you push them around.
So what is shortest path bridging for an idiot sitting in the room who's like, I don't know what that word means?
It's everything you wish spanning tree would be. In a way that it gives you full loop-free topology on layer 2, but it gives you also multipathing, it also gives you redundancy, it also gives you load balancing. It's like a fully routed L2, if you could think about it that way.
Okay, so basically it would be saying this MAC address is accessible on these ports, on these switches.
On these paths is a better
definition. These paths. Okay. And that path would be various switches and the ports through switches.
Think about it like a full mesh topology on layer 2.
Okay,
and so imagine 20 switches fully meshed. It would all work with all links being active and actively utilized, and still you would have full redundancy, you would have full rerouting of the layer 2 segment should one link go down. That's what I'm saying. It's like spanning tree, but what you wish it would be, because it deals with all of those issues that spanning tree, like spanning tree.
I'd never built anything. Does SPB allow you to basically summarize a switch with a MAC address, so you can say, all of these things are available here, and then when it gets to the end switch, it actually breaks things out to look at the individual, kind of like an MPLS tag? Or is that another protocol that I'm thinking of?
No, so it actually builds a database, a forwarding database, L2 forwarding database. And that's why I'm saying you have to look at it more from the idea of paths, right? Between two L2 endpoints, what are the available paths? What are their metrics? And how should I forward which packets through which path? That's why I'm saying it does like layer 2 ECMP, but it can also have metrics where you can say one path is 1 gig, the other path is, 10 gig, and it can do different stuff depending on that. So there is full multipathing. It's like a complete layer 2 routing.
How quick is ISIS, like as far as like failover?
It's just like any other routing. If you've got the path in your database and it's still marked as good, you try and use it, and as long as people can signal fast enough that that needs to be pulled away, it will go away. The thing that killed it was EVPN kind of jumped in there, and the idea of you, instead of using Ethernet as the underlay, which shortest path bridging really is when you look at it in the long run, it's not really Mac and Mac or anything, but it is. I mean, it's all those pieces where you're actually advertising around. You really, what we usually think of as routing, there, the same thing happens at layer 2. It's just that we're not used to thinking of it that way. You still make a decision based on things, but if you can start passing that data around more than we had in spanning tree, in spanning tree, it was basically loop avoidance. Shortest path bridging was no, I want to bridge everything, and you're going to take the shortest path.
Well, it's, if you think about it, all of it is the same. MPLS, you forward based on the destination label, right? IP forwarding, you forward based on the destination IP address, IPv6, same. And L2 forwarding is the same. You forward based on the destination MAC address. It's just you look up where you forward in different tables. That's really it. It's just abstraction applied to every layer differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems to me like a forwarding database like that would get really, really big. It
can definitely. Well, your internet routing table is more than 500,000 routes, right? So
yeah, but well, and I guess nowadays I can, for $300, have a computer that is capable of routing at more than a couple of gigs.
I mean, but it depends on the scale of what do you want to be able to talk to and know all of the paths to. I mean, if it's your house, you really don't care. It's like shove it to that router at the that's in the garage and hand it to somebody else.
And specifically, for example, for shortest path bridging, that's L2 topologies. Like, how big realistically will your layer 2 segments get, right? Like most ASICs have 8K L2 FDBs, right? And 8K destination hosts, that's entirely enough, right? For most layer 2 segments. So
at the moment, IPv6 has 2 to the 64.
Oh, we are talking about layer 2 here, though. Shortest path bridging is for layer 2, right? So you will never have to deal with IPv6 addresses because you are on layer 2.
Yeah, but IPv6/64s. The joke I was making is that we assign
right, fully utilize a /64. I see.
Sorry, I'm not very funny.
No, actually, I pity whoever will have to deal with that topology.
Now, in reality, I think what you just did there is a real good illustration of people thinking IPv4 versus IPv6, because IPv4, you look at addresses, you look at subnets as the size of how many hosts are going to be on it. And in IPv6, you just need to divorce that from your head and just stop, because you're not realistically ever going to be able to take up every IPv6 address on a subnet.
Nor do you want to, realistically. No. That's why I was saying, like, the size of the layer 2 segment is what you should be thinking about. The addressing doesn't matter. Like, the layer 2, the concepts of layer 2 break at a certain size, at a certain scale, right? Just having to deal with constantly, the broadcasts that you have for ARP, but not just that, when a switch doesn't know where a MAC address lives, it's a unicast flooding becomes an issue in very large L2 segments, right? And it's at some point that just doesn't scale anymore.
And that's purely why, the hierarchical pieces are what make those scaling issues. You can force them down a layer. It's just like your house. I'm going to push up everything to the edge and get it out of here. I don't worry about the complexity of everything else. And if the layer 2 side gets that complex, you're either going to need to do something, to start doing things at layer 3, or reduce the number of L2 pieces in there, because it really does come down to where is that scale, man? Where is that scale? If we once we can break things down so that an entire class of thing that we're looking for can be hidden behind one other identifier, Now we can start scaling these networks out. And we started, everything started at layer 2. It was, I mean, in reality, you don't get to talk to anything else except for an adjacency on your layer 2. No matter what you're doing, think about, when you do a lookup in your routing table, you don't say, oh, send this off to Facebook. You say, hey, is this on my local net? No. Oh, I'm told that, if I'm going off my local net, I go to this thing that is on my local net and I hand it to the thing on my local net and let it go. I haven't talked to anybody but the people that are directly on my local network, and yet my packet is still getting to Facebook and back.
And that even, like, you're only indirectly talking to your router if there's a switch in between, or whatever. Yep. So some sort of bridging of any kind.
All of those abstractions come in.
Yeah.
So I mean, and
the beauty of the internet.
Those concepts do break down a little bit, to be fair, in things like 4G and mobile networks and large scale wireless networks and LoRa. So there's you have topologies which are more complex than that, sure. But most of us probably don't deal with those on a daily basis. So
yeah, the IP Ethernet conglomeration or hegemony will probably be ruling us for quite a while.
I've seen a bunch of LoRa adoption, for example. Though.
Yeah.
Have you? I'm curious. What do you? Can you talk about what some of that is? I'm aside from reading meters and things like that. I'm kind of curious what people have been using it for.
Oh, it's all IoT, weather stations, large-scale distributed weather monitoring, in-city light management, and of course, then there's your usual utility data collection and all of that. So the parking spaces and reading utilization of parking spaces and bringing that all up. So yeah, it's all IoT use cases that I've seen, but it's been on the rise here, definitely.
Yeah. From what I've seen in my experience, it's all been weather stations out in the middle of nowhere. LoRaWAN has really nice, so what was happening, and a couple of WISPs around where I was in Colorado, they installed, and we installed LoRa access points that then we would forward traffic over to the University of Colorado for their monitoring stuff. And so that saved them a couple $1,000s a year in LTE SIM card costs. So and that's getting more popular, and I'm seeing more companies coming out and supporting that. But beyond that, I've wanted to have some look into doing LoRaWAN connectivity as a backbone, so it's completely separated out of Ethernet. And not that I care that it's out of Ethernet, but that it's a low power. I can just set up an access point and have it connect back to something else, and just build a mesh out of towers. And then it would be completely out of band system, so that I could do a little bit of management and such, but never really looked all that promising.
You just have to watch out for the bandwidth.
Yeah. This is the bandwidth problem. It's always is a bandwidth problem.
With LoRa, definitely.
Yeah. Yep. Very much so. Speaking of bandwidth being the problem, before we get off of that, Kevin, not Mitnick, Kevin Myers. Sorry, for some reason I was thinking Kevin. Kevin Myers did a really cool ISIS presentation over at that Prague MikroTik user meeting. Kirnak, you did as well. So they're all both up on YouTube. Check them out. Good, useful info. But to move forward in the world, people are blaming hacked MikroTik devices as being the biggest DDoSes ever. OVH Cloud is making this complaint. And most of these are just devices that are unupdated or were never like no security was there. It was just admin and blank password.
So no, actually, I just want to correct that.
Oh yes,
Because MikroTik out of box is fully secure. So no, it wasn't that it's unupdated MikroTiks. It was MikroTiks that were deployed on purpose without proper security. There is a very big difference. A MikroTik out of box with factory configuration has never been exploitable.
a MikroTik like the 5009, yes, but like the 1009s, the 1072s, 1036s, and my 2004 all came with just blank config.
But then again, you are making a choice how to configure
Correct.
it. From factory,
Yeah,
it doesn't
it
even
is-
forward packets.
True. It's actually completely secure at that point. But yes, this is entirely the users. I guess thank you, Kirnak, for correcting me on this. It is entirely user-based fault. Nobody, people have set these up and put them out on the internet and have not done basic levels of firewalling from the looks of a lot of this. And so and a lot of these devices, my understanding is that like the passwords had not been set, which is one reason why MikroTik these days is pushing everyone to set a password whenever you log in on later firmwares.
And I don't want to sound like I'm defending MikroTik here. I've done plenty of I've done plenty of monologues for MikroTik, but in this case, the reality is that it is a misconfiguration. You have to make a MikroTik unsecure. It won't be out of the box. So just to be fair here, we have to think about it critically and not just say MikroTik is trash and unsecure.
No,
because in this case, it was actually the people configuring or misconfiguring these who made the choice to knowingly or unknowingly. We could talk about should MikroTik allow this, how user friendly MikroTik is, should there be a big red banner warning, your MikroTik is unsecure. That's a different discussion. MikroTik could absolutely do much more to help users realize that their device is unsecure, absolutely. But the reality is that when you deploy a device and you deploy it in an unsecure configuration, which is not the default configuration, it is hard to blame MikroTik.
True, very much so. But it looks like there's almost 100,000 badly configured devices out there, and they were doing, let's see, what's it, 2.8 billion? Oh no, this one was 899 million packets per second. So
some packets.
Yeah. Definitely make certain your routers are secure. I think for these ones, I think this is the old what they were doing with their sockets is the problem here. And like you could create a socket on the MikroTik that then you could send out traffic as.
Is the SOX proxy?
Yeah, SOX proxy. Yeah.
There's so many ways to exploit the MikroTik. It's unsecure.
Yeah. If it's not, if you can log in, you can do whatever you like. There's a bandwidth there's a bandwidth test on there that will do.
Or just anonymous DNS reflection, all kinds of stuff. So many ways to exploit.
Yeah. And a lot of these devices are connected to pretty decent pipes that give you a good bit of upload. So
these days, your normal home internet will have 100+ megs of upload. So
that's true. Yeah.
If you're on fiber, easily you get a couple thousand of those, and suddenly you have terabytes of exploitable throughput.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy to see, and of course there's going to be more people complaining about MikroTiks. John?
I think I would complain a lot more about all the IoT devices that I can't ever possibly update.
All the cameras and sensors and thermostats and abandoned.
It's just that they're all, they have multiple manufacturers rather than just one that people can kind of look at and say, oh, these are all there. I mean, I think it's a travesty that we haven't set a law worldwide, if not in any given country, that basically says if you build an IoT device, you must do two things. The two things I want to see is, one, you have to outsource the server you're using to provide the service on that, and two, you have to provide all the software in at least escrow or something else, so people can update it if you decide that you're not going to do it anymore. I mean, the servers that people are using are just, all of the software and all the APIs are, just riddled with holes. And I would much rather see somebody forced to be put in a position where, if they put their server software out to the world and somebody else grabbed it and made a better service, then, you better be selling really good hardware, because you don't get to make it on the back end on the server.
If I released a product and I had software that I was putting on my hardware, but I was making most of my money on the hardware, I think I'd be pretty darn happy if somebody made better software for my hardware, because then I'm going to sell more hardware.
Yeah.
And then I can be like, yeah.
So I think you've just shown the case is not that anybody cares about the hardware. They care about the long-term subscription of the software.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they care about. And they will push whatever piece of crap out that they can to further that.
Yeah.
And so we have to find ways to guard against that, because I don't have any problem at all with subscription software. What I have a problem is when you leverage people into it and you aren't being honest about it.
Yeah, and and people have no alternative when your subscription service, which was inherently a closed ecosystem and didn't play nice with anything else, and so then you stopped wanting your engineer who was running at that program gets up and leaves, and you don't want to hire a new engineer.
I bought a device from you that I expected to work for 5, 10, 15 years. And you're telling me 6 months later, you brick this piece of, this hardware. There's nothing wrong with this hardware. It works perfectly fine as it was designed, but it can no longer perform the function I bought it for because of you.
Yeah. And then, Microsoft or MikroTik, wow. MikroTik is, protected by this because they've continued to support even some of their oldest. I know that there's some things that are no longer supported. They have a slowly growing list, but they have a very, very long support chain that they do. So always appreciated.
In the networking world, it's a little bit different than in the consumer world.
Yeah.
In the networking world, it is absolutely normal to see a device that lifetime given in 15 years, right?
Yeah, plus.
Sadly, the consumer space is absolutely different. There, you throw it away, you buy a new one, and that's the expectation, and that's the norm.
We're slowly getting away from that. There's people trying to get away from that, like the One Phone or Open Phone or whatever. What was their name? They just made earbuds. They're only available in the EU. I can't buy the phone or the earbuds in the United States. It's like fully modular, Android. Oh, shoot. Open Phone. No, that's not it.
Hey man, one more reason to move to the EU.
One more on the list of them. I think.
For anybody listening, that was absolutely a joke. I don't have a strong pro-EU or a pro-US stance.
Yes. I believe it is the Fairphone as I was thinking about, because they have Fairbuds. Yep, Fairphone. And I don't know. I know the Fairbuds weren't available in the United States. It doesn't look like the Fairphone is available in the United States. But hey, so we're slowly making these things better. And repairability, like I think laptop wise, like the Surface just came out, and like people have been saying like, oh, this is the most repairable thing we've seen from Microsoft ever. This is awesome.
That's the
Yeah.
sure, like, but that's the big guys who are getting pushed around by regulation.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, we are talking about things like IoT sensors and
Yeah.
metal things. Those will never be regulated to that space, and the companies that make them, they won't care, because most of the stuff, it's made by a company or that makes it, then goes bankrupt and abandons it, right? I mean, not all of it, of course, but I think most of the cases where we hear that they sold it and now they're pulling out server, it's not because, at least, again, feel free to correct me. I think it's mostly because they just go bankrupt and that's it, right? And of course, Google has their like graveyard of products. It's not like the big guys don't do it, but I think mostly it's just comes down to economic issues.
So as you're saying that, it strikes me. Any of that gear of somebody that goes bankrupt and they're done. I like it when people are easily can easily go pick up the gear and repurpose it for things.
Yeah, best case scenario.
But that also means that those are the things that somebody might be able to do drive-by firmware installs and and take them over. So that's a very interesting situation. What do you do when you have something that was horribly popular 5 years ago and there's literally billions of these cheap things lying around that, I don't know, pick up power over Bluetooth and start broadcasting, and people can take them over and use them for DDoS attacks? What do you do? And that company is long gone because they were the flash in the pan that did really well for a while, sent out a lot of things, and what do we do at that point?
Yeah, that's what I mean, that I don't know if there is a good answer to this, right? Because repairability or like longer lifetime loss, in this case, they won't make a difference. And like, what do you do? Right?
Yeah,
maybe you want these things to die.
In some regards, yes, but in some regards, yeah, you really would want things that I think at that point, like, and what would happen, John? Hundreds and thousands of IT guys would be sent out to go unplug things all over the world, like had just happened last weekend.
You're muted.
Somebody would push a software update that would fix everything except for that corner case they thought about, and it would cause blue screens. And anyway,
I don't know. It's hard, right? Because it goes into economical stuff. It goes into literally the structuring of the economic system and capitalism that we use right now. Like those are just issues which I don't. There are much smarter philosophers and economists arguing about this than we are. So
yeah,
I don't know if there is a solution.
Yeah, maybe there isn't, but we can at least bring it up and maybe some young mind will pick up the idea and get a good idea. And
it would be really cool if somebody thought about this stuff and then went to a conference and talked to the people that they met there while they were drinking a beer or whatever else, whatever beverage they enjoy. Sorry.
Yeah. No, hey, it's
pushing the idea. Come on,
callback.
Guys.
We're making callbacks here. As far as speaking of new products, Cambium 450V is hitting the shelves. It gives us 6 gigahertz for under $6,000. You can have a access point that'll do the whole 5 and 6 spectrum, and you can have 2 completely separate channels that are treated independently, and CPU can connect to one or the other or both and bond both. I don't know if the CPUs are capable of doing the bonding both, but I know that in the future firmware revision, they'll be able to have up to 4 channels that can be utilized individually or bonded together by CPUs. So pretty cool to finally see that hitting. I would say that's going to be kind of a lower cost competitor for Tirana stuff. I know that there's been some bugs with the early release hardware, but
I've been working lately. Most of my time has been taken up consulting with the state of New Mexico with the Office of Broadband, and um, primarily I've been helping them stand up a network that has to do with statewide education and for the elementary schools that we're trying to help put things together. But part of it, ends up evaluating proposals from people that are trying to get grants to build out fiber or otherwise get some connectivity out there. And it's been very interesting to me to watch the people that are primarily um, policy based folks that don't really know all of the technical pieces have been coming up and asking me things like, what do you think about this cambium stuff versus Tirana? It's a lot cheaper and we can make our grant money stretch further. I mean, if it's places we can't build fiber easily, should we be looking at things like this? And I was really kind of sad to point out to them that I really don't know what's going on all that well right now. But listening to the chatter on um, on the different forums and on Brothers WISP, it's been very interesting seeing what people are doing with that and some of the proposals that have been popping up in it. There's a significant difference.
Yeah.
The Toronto tax is real,
Yeah.
and it's getting significant enough that um, people that are outside of this that are pushing grant dollars are noticing it.
Well, but that's the whole reason Toronto, got their money, their private capital money is, hey, we're going to have something that is completely new, and it's going to be expensive, and there's going to be monthly fees for this to run this, and we're going to, it's going to be a multi-level. We're going to change things and get money, silk money out. I mean, how long has it been since Cambium had a per CPE license? I don't. I mean, 5 years on their higher end equipment, as I recall. So when I think they eliminated it 5 or 6 years ago. Because that was like one of the complaints I remember in the forums is people being, and reason why we didn't use Cambium is there was a per CP license that you had to pay, and it's like, God, I'm not interested in this. We're already barely making money. So, but now wireless has gotten quite enough profitable that and competitive in fiber as far as speeds that they're able to bring back some really cool technology and come out swinging. We'll it's wait and see to see how long it's going to take for Cambium to really have a direct competitor. And it's weird having Cambium not be the premier equipment, but that's what happens when you get to be the top dog. Is that
question is if the business model still makes sense after the grant.
I mean, I would bet Tirana's been making money the last 3 years.
What I mean is is that because of all the overinflation of money through grants being available, will the business model still make sense once you lose those grants? Because the grants are basically paying those high prices for you, right?
Depends on some of the older stuff here in the States were definitely that way because they were paying operational costs for 2 or 3 years for networks that weren't ever going to generate enough cash to keep themselves up and running. There's been at least, there's been 1 or 2 of those that were in really rural markets that I've had to, I've been the last ISP standing to help keep those types of things up and running for, short times before we could kind of find a way to find someone local to take it over. It's very interesting watching when you use government money like that to alter those markets in that way.
Yeah. So do you think that I don't know. I think that a lot of the guys who I've seen building Tirana have been paying for it out of pocket. Admittedly, there's plenty of grants and such, but like the really big grants and what Tirana and everyone else is aiming for, the BEAD funding, that not a single dollar of that has been spent yet, in grant form at least. So if all, if Tirana was focusing on like BEAD existing or some version of BEAD existing when they came out. I think
Tomas, do you know about BEAD?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Because I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's definitely a U.S. thing where the feds finally said, let's give some money to the states. Let's see how they ruin this. I mean, how they use it.
It's been a pervasive topic enough on every single conference that I went to that I couldn't have not heard about it.
Yeah. So I mean, but I think Tirana will be something that's able to stick through, especially if they're able to continue to innovate and build like cooler, bigger stuff. If they think the G2 or whatever that's able to do the full 5 and 6 gigahertz band, is going to be enough to really keep them. I think Campion will be able to eventually, and other competitors, Radwin, Mimosa, and Ubiquity maybe eventually will come out with something. That would be and honestly, actually, no, Ubiquity already does have a Tirana killer. It's our competitor. It would be the Wave platform, because Wave is able to do very similar or more bandwidth in certain situations at a fraction of the cost. So
maybe so most of the people that I've interacted with that run Tirana, and this might be a very limited experience to the people that I talk with, they're actually deploying Tirana from some kind of financing, right? Either from local grant money or blah blah blah. And again, that might not be indicative of the bigger term, but like, yeah, to me the question is this a healthy trend for the industry even? And how, because Tirana is absolutely backed by VC money, and we've seen VC players come into this space and very quickly exit it. And like, you can be sure that if Tirana doesn't make enough money in the targets that their VC fund has for, it's going to be abandoned there, right? And like, I don't know, my feelings on this are quite mixed.
Well, I hope it goes for a while. I'm actually talking to you over a unlicensed Tirana link that has been self-funded by the folks that I work with. And it's replacing, actually it hasn't replaced, it's still up and running. There's a Microtech CRX or QRX or something up on the roof that is actually it's better from a latency standpoint, but it can't compete with the on the bandwidth side. I'm not sure which one I like better. I think I like the latency better because it's, the Microtech, when I've only got me, I'm the only person on the access point downtown at this point, that it is perfectly fine for all the traffic I need at the house, and the jitter is much smaller and the latency is smaller.
So I have noticed a little bit in your video, like jittery maybe. What have you been seeing on the Tirana as far as jitter wise?
I don't have real numbers there, but I'm going from like 6-7 milliseconds round trip to from 12 to 40 or 50 every once in a while, and I'm roughly the only person on that Tirana AP as well. There may be 4 or 5 other new ones. I mean, it's not even loaded up yet.
Okay, so not super. I've seen 2 different networks where I got to play in there, and I was seeing about 20 to 30 milliseconds jitter. Now, unfortunately, they weren't really loaded. But I'm really curious to see what that looks like as the scaling gets larger for various people. Obviously, there's some guys out there that are doing that, and we'll see what people start reporting about that. here in the next few
Yeah,
months.
I'm not really interested in going back to the days of like the DMT DSL that, you know, had 20, 30 milliseconds of latency in the first hop.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think we're going to. I think five to I would say under 20 is acceptable for most things if you have good backbone and you can get outside of your network fast. But you know that's a whole. That's all. That's just a where are you at and where's your customers and what are your customers? If actually no, I'm okay with quite a bit of latency, as long as it is consistent. If I'm getting 60, 80 millisecond, oh, you're muted again.
So I was going to say, spoken like a true voice guy.
Spoken like a true voice guy who is a guy who's had to support voice. I hate voice.
Yeah.
I'm not a voice guy, but I hate it enough to know that I want jitter. And actually, it's less so much the voice side as my video gaming side. If it's consistent, I can play around that. I can play with 120 milliseconds of latency if it's always 120 milliseconds. I can just pre-press my buttons. But voice, you can't do that. You can't pre-save. So, but yeah, no. If funding $24,000 equipment, now admittedly, this is just the ISP supplies rough numbers that they say for everybody. You're going to get cheaper if you talk to your vendor of choice, but self-funding that is really hard, especially for most guys. So yeah, I could definitely see that a lot of guys are talking about getting loans and such to do it. But yeah, honestly, it's just kind of where we're going. Like these are I mean, have either of you ever seen the cost of an LTE radio majigger? I don't know how much Verizon, what the Nokia or the Samsung antennas out there or in radios will cost.
But those people also look at their networks differently than most of the WISPs. Most of the WISPs are WISPs are basically bootstrapping themselves into something bigger and bigger. And the telco world is basically, I'm going to go spend a bunch of money up front. It's the brick crap house. I'm going to build this thing and it's going to support more people than we're going to have in the first 5 years. And then we're going to spend 6-7 years selling the crap out of it, packing this network with as many people as we can on it, and then writing the residual subscriptions for the next 10 years.
Not just that, but like for stuff like LTE and public voice, you have again regulation. You have the 911 availability and all that. So it's a completely different world and different rules.
And that's why they have to live that way, because they have to build all of those services into it up front and know what they're going to be building, know what they're going to be passing across there, so that when somebody comes up and says, well, we need to do this, they can, that's why they tell you, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that because, this system does it this other way. And it doesn't always make sense to the people that have, been used to building networks on the fly and scaling them up as needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just completely different worldviews. And I'm glad that I grew up or cut my teeth in on this side.
There's plus and minuses to both sides. Yeah. Because on the other side, you can look at people and say, no, that, that's not what this network was built for. You need to go find someone else to do it. So, you minimize the problem areas that you run into. It's just, we were talking about earlier about, do you want to deal with thousands and thousands of peerings and, lots of, route splay, or do you want to minimize that? And, your engineering's a lot easier. You're not running around trying to figure out where the problems are, because you've minimized where those problems can occur.
It's also like when you are designing something in this space, in the ISP space, it's mostly about cost saving, right? And looking at What is the least amount of money I can spend to get what I want? Whereas in more enterprise grade or carrier grade stuff, it's more about, yeah, we have these requirements, and we cannot, like the 911 availability, right? We cannot compromise on that. So we have to make solution and choices and gear and architecture in a different way. And if somebody doesn't like it, well, here is the regulation that says it has to be this way. And it's like a very different game, right? And yeah, pros and cons to everything.
I mean, they're still trying to minimize the costs of what's going
Sure,
on. It's
I'm
just
not
that,
saying they are just, yeah.
you just have deeper pockets to provide the tools up front. It's you're not running around looking to try and find someone to fund your Toronto gear. Somebody has already said, we're building this network out, and here's the money for it. But
what
you
I
better
meant
have
is
very
more so in a space of, you won't have somebody telling you, oh, don't use that. This is, half as cheap. Doesn't matter that it can do something. Well, you don't have that kind of approach.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. But when people coming from those different viewpoints, I mean, that's where you get into these arguments where, people are yelling, oh, you're a Microtix fanboy, or you're a Ubiquiti. It's like, no, guys, these are the tools that work well for, the situations we're trying to solve.
Right tool for the right job.
Yeah, very much so. So speaking of government requirements, and more focused on United States, Universal Service Fund has been struck down by the Fifth Circuit Court. So for those, actually, John, for those who don't know what the Universal Service Fund is, and who have blessedly not been subjected to its wiles and ways, do you want to give us a quick overview?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to do this, but what I'll say that, in the efforts of being fair, there's a universal service fund that, people are being charged excess money so that there is a pool of money to be able to pay for things where service is more expensive. So it's always been cheaper to do telecommunication services in large cities, in any place where the population density is high, and more expensive in other places. So the idea in most places has been to have a universal price that everybody pays, and the people in the countryside, they don't pay quite as much as they would, they don't pay as much as they probably should for the cost of their service, and the people in the cities are paying more. And in the long run, you even things out. So that the USF fund is basically, that's the heart of where it came from. So it's excess money that people have been paying into services to, on, daily internet access or phone services or anything else that has been paying for things in other use spaces. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's phone equipment and more it's been turning into internet connectivity. And here in the US, there was a recent Supreme Court ruling that people here is, referred to as Chevron, where it's saying that there are a number of times that the US Congress is supposed to make laws. And sometimes those laws get, they delegate some of their powers to other departments, say the FCC. So anything having to do with communications, Congress can say, here, FCC, you get to take care of this. And the FCC further pushed that delegation for the USF funds to another entity. And I don't know, I can't argue all of the legal pieces of it, but it really came down to a judge finally said, no, that's Congress's job. So everything that's been done here is unconstitutional because Congress didn't say that. Some rogue entity said it. And just because people have been enforcing it doesn't mean that that's the law of the land. And so they're pushing it back and saying, okay, these USF laws aren't really laws, so no one has to follow them. And now we're in the middle of, what's the fallout of this going to be? Does that mean that Congress is going to run around and immediately say, no, those are the real laws and enact it? They have the power to do that. We haven't seen our Congress move that quickly in a long time. So I doubt that that's going to be what's going to happen. So the question now comes, do we have people that start dismantling the USF funding? In which case, a lot of that money goes into what's called E-rate, and E-rate is used by many schools in many places to pay for their internet connectivity. And it's also used to fund build outs to schools and to other community anchor institutions and things like that. So there's a lot of money going in, and it's going to have far-reaching consequences if the spigot is just shut off.
Yeah, so the previous company that I worked for was a USF fund receiver, because we were in an area that was designated very rural, and the federal government decided, yeah, we want to pay this much money for Croghan Enterprises Croghan Telephone Co-op to make certain that every household in this area could get phone service. And that was slowly changing over. I can't remember what the program was originally, but I think it's ACAM 2 now is what they're in. And that's a monthly amount of money to go that was supposed to go towards building out of fiber and build out of paying for people's paychecks, all that, for running running phone services and such. My frustration was I saw in a lot of different companies that were receiving those money, that universal service fund, that was a lot of waste and promises left unfulfilled. And then like the schools were out around me, they were paying exorbitant fees for their bandwidth that was E-rate funded, just because there was no one else to compete, and no one, they didn't even know, or the requirement, they're like, oh well, it's 3,000. They say it's $3,000 this year. Okay, it's $3,000. We're just going to pay it for the E-rate money.
Well, it runs into just the same things we were talking about earlier when Tomas was saying, it's when it's grant money, it's not your money.
Yeah.
It's not coming out of your pocket. So, everybody just kind of says, oh yeah, don't worry about it. So there was a lot of, I think in USF and anything where the government's paying for it instead of people, you're going to run into that where prices are inflated, competition is diminished, all of those pieces. But at the same time, the money was, it may have been expensive, but it was doing services that weren't going to happen anyway. So I'm kind of mixed in this one, in the idea that I don't want to see USF completely go away, but it certainly needs some reform, and it needs.
I would absolutely agree with that. Just in the mere fact of people being, I have seen people get layer 2 in state, so between two cities inside of a state, transport, wave transport, and then the price for that transport was double the first month that they signed up for it, because USF fees were put on top. That was that's not how that's supposed to work.
Yeah.
And then it was impossible to fight with any of the carriers. It would be randomly slapped on something, and you're just this is not. So very much clarification of the rules would make life a lot better.
Clarification of the rules and clarifying, you're also talking about billing issues now, and that we all know that the telcos, they spend more money trying to figure out how to bill you on something than, anything else, it seems like at times, particularly, in voice traffic anymore.
Oh my gosh.
You spend more money rating calls than you do transferring calls, but
yeah,
there's another story.
Yeah, we have, the amount of money we have to spend for our phone billing is absolutely insane. And but half of those bills aren't just USF. Those are just, opportunistic cities were oh, hey, we can tax and make money off of the phone services sold in town. Great, let's do that. So very frustrating.
So I mean,
all right.
that all comes back into when we were talking about BEAD and everything else. Those
Yeah.
are all, how do you fund this stuff? Tomas was talking earlier about the EU, and I got to spend the last few. I spent about a week on a river cruise and along the Rhine, and one of the trips I got to take off the ship was into the Black Forest, and we're riding along in a bus. And there's places where there's construction going on. And I look out the window and everybody's planting fiber on the side of the highways. It doesn't matter where I am, if I'm in Europe or if I'm in the west coast of the US. If there's a problem right now that, along a road, the construction that's going on is someone's putting communication infrastructure in. So, I mean, the money is going to things that we need.
Yeah.
The question is how well it's being spent.
Well, and how well will it be managed in the long run? Yeah, if it's going in the ground, you got to buy locators. And locators, they can be wrong. And when they are wrong, you got to fix. So,
and how much of that infrastructure is actually needed versus overbuilding? Like there, for the infrastructure investment and overbuilding, you just have to look at China, right? And the railroads, like high-speed railroads to a city with 2,000 people, right? So, and I'm not saying that we are at that point yet, but it's one of the risks that needs to be managed.
I will say we are. When I go step in someplace here in the U.S., you'll hear people saying, "We need to build fiber. We need to build fiber." And I go out to the places that they're talking about. I'm like, well, why are there six people going through here? 3 of them are long haul and 3 of them are local, and yet no one in this area has fiber to the house. But every school has it because of E-rate money, and every cell phone tower has it because there's money for that. But they bypass entire subdivisions.
Yeah.
And
the
policy people don't. Well, the policy people don't understand that. They're like, well, there's no fiber there. It's like, yes, there is. It's just not the fiber you're thinking of. And those people already promised to build those out in most of these places. They just haven't done it because you haven't held their feet to the fire.
Yeah, the lack of feet holding to fires. Telecommunications rule whining. All right, well, is there any other fun, big, new topics we haven't talked about yet, boys?
I'm done. I'm tapped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're about that time.
Yeah, well, my kitten has left me alone. He got antsy. So little Milo, he's not mine, but he comes sits with me. All right, well, people out on the internet, if you wanted to get a hold of John, how should you do that?
I always give people an email address, john@osmond.net, OSMON.
All righty. And then Kirnak can people still go to unimus.com and ping you there?
Unimus.net, and just live chat and ask for me. That's all it takes.
So Tommy at lostcreek.tech. You can buzz me there. I'm going to be working on my website a bit over the next couple of weeks because I got some free time. Reach out, say hi, tell me I'm wrong or stupid, and I will try to counter your argument or learn. Either way, I will be happy because I love a good argument.
Just give us a listen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
the mission.
catch you later.
You don't know what
Thanks,
you
everyone.
are missing. Ideas and some good comedy given. If you missed the show already, don't worry, you're forgiven.